In the sprawling, frost-bitten world of Norse mythology, there are gods of thunder and war gods of wisdom and magic. These are figures carved from the very ice and fire of creation, their names echoing through sagas and poems recited in long winter nights. We know of Thor, with his mighty hammer, Mjolnir, and Odin, the All-Father, who sacrificed an eye for ultimate knowledge. Yet among these formidable deities, there lived a god so fair and gentle that his very presence brought light to the nine realms. His name was Baldr, and his story, more than any other, is a heartbreaking tale of beauty, lost a tragedy that would set in motion the end of the world. Baldr was no minor deity, dwelling in the shadows of his more famous kin. He was a prince of the Aesir, the primary pantheon of Norse gods, who made their home in the celestial fortress of Asgard. His lineage was impeccable, born of the highest authority and divine grace. His father was the great Odin, chief of the gods. His mother was the powerful goddess Frigg, queen of Asgard. As their son, Baldr was cherished above all others, a beacon of hope and purity, in a world often defined by conflict. His home, a heavenly hall named Breidablik, perfectly reflected his nature. It was a place of absolute purity and serenity, a sanctuary where no falsehood could be spoken and no unclean thing could ever enter. The very walls seemed to radiate a gentle warmth, and the air was filled with a peace that calmed the most troubled of hearts. Here Baldr lived with his devoted wife Nanna, and together they represented an ideal of divine love and harmony. He was also the master of the greatest ship ever constructed, Hringhorni. To understand Baldr is to understand the soul of Norse mythology itself. He was not just a god, he was a symbol. He represented everything the Vikings and Norse peoples held dear: light, beauty, innocence, and justice. His judgments were said to be so fair and wise that they could never be challenged or overturned. He was the embodiment of the summer sun, a stark contrast to the harsh, unforgiving winters of the north. His story is not merely a myth about a single god's demise, it is a profound exploration of the fragile nature of goodness and the inescapable sorrow that awaits even the brightest of lights. The world of the Norse gods was not a static paradise. It was a realm living under the constant looming threat of a final, cataclysmic battle. This prophesied doom was known as Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods. It was a fate foretold in ancient verses, a destiny woven into the very fabric of existence by the Norns, the weavers of fate. Every god in Asgard, from Odin down to the lowliest servant, knew that their world had an expiration date. They knew that a great winter would come, that giants and monsters would rise, and that the gods themselves would fall in a blaze of glory and destruction. This sense of an unavoidable end cast a long and deep shadow over the golden halls of Asgard. It shaped the actions and motivations of all its inhabitants. Odin relentlessly sought knowledge, travelling the nine realms to gather secrets that might delay or alter this terrible fate. Thor, the god of thunder, patrolled the borders of the godly realm, his hammer ever ready to strike down the giants who were their sworn enemies. The gods lived with a kind of heroic fatalism, a belief that while destiny could not be averted, it must be met with courage, honour and defiance until the very last moment. It is within this context of impending doom that the story of Baldr becomes so critically important. His life was the fragile peace before the storm. As long as Baldr, the shining and beloved god, was alive, there was a sense that the darkness could be held at bay. His existence was a guarantee of order, a symbol that the world was still in balance. The prophecy of Ragnarök was a distant thunder, but Baldr's death would be the lightning strike that heralded the storm's immediate arrival. His fate was inextricably linked to the fate of the entire cosmos. The gods knew this, and none more so than his mother, Frigg, whose prophetic sight gave her glimpses of the tragedy to come. The story of Baldr begins not with an act of war or a grand quest, but with a dream, a nightmare in fact. Baldr began to be plagued by terrible visions foretelling his own death, dreams that filled his serene hall of Breidablik with a sense of dread. These were not mere mortal anxieties, they were divine premonitions, whispers from the threads of fate themselves, signaling that the first great stone in the avalanche of Ragnarök was about to be dislodged. The peace of Asgard was about to be shattered forever. Centuries have passed since the last Viking longship sailed the northern seas, and the worship of the old Norse gods has faded into the mists of history. Yet the stories they told, the myths they wove, continue to captivate us. They speak to something primal within the human spirit, exploring timeless themes of creation, conflict, love, and loss. Of all these ancient tales, the shocking fate of Baldr remains one of the most powerful and resonant. It is a story that has been passed down through generations, first through oral tradition and later preserved in remarkable medieval texts from Iceland and Denmark. The tale of the beautiful god, murdered through the treachery of a fellow deity, has a universal appeal that transcends its cultural origins. It is, at its core, the ultimate story of innocence betrayed. Baldr, who was harmed by no one and loved by all, becomes a victim of jealousy and senseless malice. His death is not a glorious end on a battlefield, but a tragic accident engineered by the cunning trickster Loki. This element of a perfect life cut short by a cruel twist of fate is a narrative that we see reflected in our own literature and history, a sorrowful pattern that continues to move us deeply. Furthermore, Baldr's story serves as a profound meditation on the nature of grief and the limits of power. Even the most powerful beings in the Norse cosmos, Odin and Frigg, are rendered helpless in the face of their son's destiny. Frigg's desperate attempt to protect him by securing oaths from all of creation is a moving portrait of a mother's love. But it also highlights the idea that some fates are simply inescapable. The subsequent journey to the underworld to bargain for his return only deepens the tragedy, showing that even when a solution seems possible, a single act of spite can seal a terrible doom. This is why the myth of Baldr endures. It's not just an adventure story about gods and giants. It's a deeply human drama played out on a cosmic scale. It explores our greatest fears, the loss of a loved one, the triumph of malice over goodness, and the knowledge that some things, once broken, can never be fully repaired. His death marks the turning point in the Norse saga, the moment when the world loses its light and begins its inevitable slide toward Ragnarök. It is a story that reminds us that even in a world of gods, beauty is fragile and sorrow is a fundamental part of existence. In the pantheon of the Aesir, gods were defined by strength and wisdom. Baldr stood apart. He was the most beautiful of the gods, a figure of radiant fairness. The Prose Edda struggles to capture his splendor. Light shone from him, illuminating Asgard. His hair was like spun gold, his face serene. This beauty was the manifestation of his inner purity. Norse poets compared him to the chamomile flower. Baldr's beauty was more ethereal than a warrior's. It spoke of innocence, a contrast to the brutal world of the gods. His qualities mirrored his appearance. He was the wisest, his wisdom born of empathy. He was fair-spoken, his words soothing disputes. All of Asgard listened to Baldr, drawn to his truth and compassion. This made him the most beloved figure in Asgard. His existence was a reassuring presence. He was the ideal summer, a promise of peace. A world without him was a bitter winter, a tragic prophecy. Baldr's home, Breidablik, reflected his essence. Its name meant broad gleaming or wide shining. The sagas say Breidablik was the most beautiful hall in Asgard, shimmering with light. It was a sanctuary of peace where malice could not exist. This underscored Baldr's nature, an active force for purity. Baldr lived there with his wife, Nanna. Their union reflected the harmony of his existence. Baldr's ship, Hringhorni, was the greatest ever built. Tragically, it became his funeral pyre. Baldr embodied light, beauty and innocence, a beacon of hope in the harsh Norse world. Yet his perfection made him vulnerable. His death is a stark reminder of how fragile goodness is. Baldr's fall marks the end of a golden age, signaling the world's inevitable decline. He stands as a tragic symbol, the brightest light, lost forever, leaving only sorrow in its wake. The memory of Baldr is a haunting echo of beauty and peace that can never return. The Poetic Edda, a collection of ancient Norse poems, offers glimpses of Baldr's tragic fate. In Voluspa, his death is foretold as a world-shattering event, a wound that leads to Ragnarök. Baldr's drama reveals his nightmares and Odin's desperate quest for answers, confirming his doom. Lokasenna shows Loki boasting of his role in Baldr's death, deepening the god's grief. These fragments together paint Baldr as a beloved god whose loss casts a shadow over all of myth. Snorri Sturluson's Prose Edda weaves the scattered myths into a vivid, unified tragedy. He details Baldr's ominous dreams, Frigg's failed protections, and Loki's cunning betrayal. The god's horror, Baldr's funeral, and the failed attempt to bring him back are all told with heartbreaking clarity. Snorri's account transforms Baldr's story into one of mythology's most complete and devastating sagas. Without Snorri, Baldr's tale would be only whispers. With him, it's unforgettable. Outside the Eddas, Saxo Grammaticus's Gesta Danorum recasts Baldr as a mortal prince in a tale of rivalry and war. Here, Baldr and Hoda fight for Nanna's love, and Baldr's death comes by a magical sword, not mistletoe. This version strips away divine fate, focusing on human ambition and conflict. Traces of Baldr appear across the Germanic world, in healing charms, royal genealogies and place names. These fragments show Baldr's legend was widespread, resonating far beyond Iceland. Baldr's nightmares shattered Asgard's peace, foretelling his own death and the world's sorrow. Odin, seeking answers, journeyed to the underworld and awakened Osiris, who confirmed Baldr's doom. She revealed that Baldr would die by his brother Hoda's hand, and the gods could not prevent it. The prophecy sealed Baldr's fate, casting a shadow over the gods and their golden age. Odin returned, burdened with the knowledge that the end had begun. While Odin sought answers in the underworld, Frigg, his wife, took a different path. As Queen of Asgard, gifted with foresight, she felt the truth of Baldr's doom. Refusing to accept fate, Frigg embarked on a quest to protect her son. She sought oaths from everything in creation, ensuring nothing would harm Baldr. She spoke to fire, water, metals, stones, trees, sicknesses and beasts. The response was overwhelming. All creation vowed not to harm Baldr. An impenetrable shield formed around Baldr, a testament to Frigg's love. The Aesir celebrated Baldr's invincibility, devising games where they hurled weapons at him, which bounced harmlessly off. The gods celebrated Baldr's invulnerability, a victory over dark prophecies. Every deflected axe reaffirmed their Prince of Light was safe. Frigg, securing oaths from all creation, overlooked a humble mistletoe, deeming it too harmless. This single exception became Baldr's fatal flaw. The mistletoe, unbound, retained the power to harm Baldr. It was the key to unlock the doom prophecy demanded. His downfall would come from the one thing no one feared. Unaware, the gods continued their games, their confidence growing. Their safety was an illusion, hiding a deadly vulnerability. A person watching from the shadows would soon exploit it. While Asgard celebrated, Loki, the trickster god, harboured envy for Baldr's universal adoration. He saw the gods' game as an opportunity for mischief and resolved to uncover the secret to Baldr's invulnerability. Loki, a shapeshifter, disguised himself as an old woman and sought out Frigg. He inquired about the oath that protected Baldr. Frigg, proud and unsuspecting, revealed that all things had sworn an oath except the mistletoe, deemed too harmless. Loki's plan took shape. He shed his disguise and sought the mistletoe. He crafted it into a deadly dart. The instrument of Asgard's tragedy was forged. With the deadly mistletoe dart, Loki returned to the field where the gods were celebrating. He scanned the crowd, searching for a pawn to carry out his plan. His gaze fell upon Hoda, Baldr's blind brother, unable to participate in the games. Loki approached Hoda, offering to guide his hand and provide a branch to throw. Loki placed the sharpened mistletoe dart into Hoda's hand. He had no idea that he was being armed with the instrument of his brother's doom. Loki positioned the blind god, aiming his arm directly at Baldr. He put his full strength into the throw, sending the dart flying toward Baldr. The mistletoe dart flew straight, a tiny streak against the sky. It was guided by malice, a perfect convergence of Loki's plan. The other gods barely noticed, expecting it to bounce off Baldr. But this weapon was different, not bound by any oath. It pierced his chest, sinking deep into his heart. The laughter died, replaced by silence. Baldr collapsed to the ground. He was dead. The gods were paralyzed by grief. The joyous game had turned into tragedy. Their sorrow turned to fury, searching for the one responsible. Loki had guided the throw. Odin knew this was the beginning of the end. The grief of the gods fell over the golden halls of Asgard. They resolved to give Baldr a funeral worthy of his magnificence, cremating him upon his great ship, Hringhorni. The ship was so immense that they could not move it from the shore. The gods sought help from Jotunheim, requesting the aid of the giantess Hyrrokin. She arrived riding a giant wolf. With a single push, she sent the great ship hurtling into the sea. Baldr's body was carried aboard the ship. Nanna, his devoted wife, died from sorrow. The gods placed her body on the pyre alongside Baldr. Odin laid his magical golden ring Draupnir upon his son's chest. The great ship was set alight, a blazing funeral monument. Representatives from all the 9 realms stood on the shore, watching as the fire consumed the brightest light their world had ever known. The burning of Hringhorni marked the beginning of an age of mourning. As the embers died, a profound gloom settled over Asgard. The laughter fell silent, the joyous music ceased. The death of Baldr was a wound from which the gods could not recover. Frigg mourned, and Odin carried the heavy burden of his prophetic knowledge. Thor's grief manifested as a smouldering rage. The pantheon was united in sadness, their community fractured, the consequences rippled outwards. Loki's taunts confirmed his guilt, and the gods captured him. But even retribution brought no relief. His death had unleashed a darkness. The age of light was over. In the heavy silence, Frigg refused to surrender to despair. She asked if any would journey to Hel and offer a ransom for Baldr's return. Hermod the Bold, son of Odin, stepped forward. Odin lent him Sleipnir, the 8-legged horse, to travel between worlds. Hermod rode into the twilight toward the realm of the deceased. After 9 nights, he came to the Jol River and the Golden Bridge, Yalabru. Modgudr, the bridge guardian, questioned him but allowed him to pass. He arrived at the gates of Hel. Hermod spurred Sleipnir, and the horse leaped over the gates. Inside he found Baldr. Now he had to plead with the Queen of Hel for his brother's return. Hermod spent the night in the cold halls of the underworld. The next morning he sought an audience with Hel, daughter of Loki. Hermod approached her throne and pleaded for Baldr's release, describing the sorrow in Asgard. Hel proposed a test. If everything in the 9 realms wept for Baldr, he would be freed. But if even one thing refused, he would remain in the underworld forever. Baldr gave Hermod the ring Draupnir for Odin, and Nanna sent a robe for Frigg. Hermod returned to Asgard with the news. Hermod's return galvanized the gods. Messengers were dispatched to every corner of the 9 realms, carrying a solemn request: weep for Baldr. A great wave of sorrow washed over creation. The gods wept, humans cried, animals whimpered, and even the inanimate world mourned. But as the messengers returned, they met a giantess, Tok, who refused to weep. "Let Hel keep what she has," she said. Baldr's fate was sealed. The messengers knew it was Loki, ensuring Baldr could never return, leaving the gods in permanent sorrow. The death of Baldr triggered the grim prophecies of Ragnarök. Odin would be devoured by the wolf Fenrir, Thor would fall to the poison of the world serpent, and the world would sink beneath the waves. Yet destruction was not the final word. The sagas speak of a rebirth, of a new world emerging. Baldr's return is foretold. Baldr and his brother Hoder will emerge from the underworld, reconciled and ready to preside over a new age of peace. Their return is the ultimate symbol of forgiveness and healing. Baldr's return is the cornerstone of the world's second chance. Baldr's story has left a mark on our understanding of the Norse worldview. His legacy is not of a warrior, but of a symbol. His tale explores good and evil, innocence and malice. Baldr represents pure goodness, while Loki embodies active evil. The conflict is the struggle between light and darkness. His myth meditates on grief, a world-altering force. Baldr's legacy is tied to fate or weird. His death was inevitable, foreseen in prophecies. His return after Ragnarök adds another layer, implying renewal. Ultimately, Baldr endures because he embodies hope. His story is a cycle from life to death and back. He is the promise that summer will come. Baldr is the enduring light. The story of Baldr is the great tragedy at the heart of the Norse sagas. A tale so potent that its echoes shaped the destiny of the entire cosmos. More than any other myth, it encapsulates the profound duality of the Viking Age worldview. The fate of Baldr is not simply the story of a single god's death. It is a grand, sweeping opera of love, loss, betrayal. His death, therefore, is the turning point, the moment the world loses its balance and begins its inexorable slide toward Ragnarök. The prophecy of Baldr's return after the world's destruction transforms the tragedy into a cycle of cosmic significance. His return is the guarantee of a new beginning. He is both the sorrow and the sunrise. Centuries later, Baldr continues to cast a long shadow. He has become an archetype, a symbol of betrayed innocence. His story speaks to a truth. Light and beauty are precious and must be protected. The unprovoked nature of his death resonates as a commentary on senseless destruction. It is a story that gives weight to grief, portraying it as a world-altering force. Baldr stands out for his unambiguous goodness. He is simply the light, a figure of immense symbolic power. He represents the ideal, the possibility of a world guided by fairness. Ultimately, Baldr remains unforgotten because his story is a mirror, reflecting our deepest fears and hopes. He is the promise that spring will one day return.